Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to give you the full review for the Dell U3219Q 32-inch 4K monitor that I have been using intensively for 2 weeks for work purposes. As usual, for all my tech reviews, my review will be from the perspective of an artist, a graphic designer, someone who reads and writes a lot, someone who does photo and video editing on a daily basis. So today I'm going to talk about my experiences when it comes to using this for work purposes. Now this review is going to be a bit long, so if you want to save some time, you can actually check out the text review that I have already written and posted on my blog. The link to this text review will be in the video description below. In the unboxing video that I released 2 weeks ago, I asked you guys to send me some questions regarding the monitor. I have already answered some of the questions in the comment section. Today I'm going to go through some of the issues that you guys have brought up in this video. Now before we start the review, I have to thank Dell Singapore for providing me yet again with another review unit. Thank you very much. This is my first time using a 32-inch 4K monitor, and my overall experience is a positive one. There are a few surprises, things I have to adjust to, but overall it's a pretty satisfying experience. Alright, let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about the design and build quality of this monitor. This is a huge display. The screen together with the stand takes up quite a lot of space on my table. If you want to free up some space on your table, you can actually VESA mount this. Now the design is very functional, very typical Dell, very clean. I like the thin 6mm bezel that goes all around. This is uniform, which looks great. The logo is small, unobtrusive. There is adjustability for the height, the tilt, and you can also rotate this sideways. And build quality seems to be very solid. This monitor is quite thin for its size. If you want to adjust the monitor's height or tilt or anything, you need to use two hands because this screen is actually quite heavy. So on the side here we have two USB 3 ports. There are two more down here. I have connected quite a lot of cables below. I'll talk about them later. Now this screen has a matte surface that comes with an anti-glare coating, and this screen is best used further away from strong light sources. So right now I have a window on the side, so you can see this white glaze that appears at certain angles. So when I'm working with this screen, I would actually close my curtains. Glare from the anti-glare coating is not that obvious when you are viewing the display straight on like this. This is how the monitor looks in vertical orientation. Now I work in a newspaper industry, and some of my colleagues, they use monitors in vertical orientation. And this is how a broadsheet news page would look like on this screen. This is scaled to fill the page, and with a monitor this size, 32-inch with 4K resolution, you can view the whole page, and the text is large enough to be legible. It's very comfortable to read at this size, and you still have palettes on the side. Basically, you can see a lot. You can see the page at a glance. If you're working on single shorter pages, for example, if you're designing for tabloid news pages or magazines, or you're doing book design, if you're still using the vertical format, you're going to get a lot of space at the top and at the bottom. And in those cases, for those workflows, it's best to use the monitor in horizontal format. Now the physical size of this monitor is quite impressive. Depending on the size of your page, you may be able to view it on this display at 1:1 at the actual size of your printed page. So just to compare it to something physical, I have this 9x12-inch journal here. Let me open this up so that it becomes 18x12 inches. This is larger than a sheet of A3 size paper. So if you are designing anything up to A3 size, you will be able to view it 1:1 at actual size on this monitor. Now just to give you the actual dimensions of the length and the width, we have, this is 16 inches or 42 centimeters. And this is about 28 inches and 70 centimeters. Some of my web design friends would also use the monitor in vertical orientation because they want to see their web pages, the whole design, well, at a glance. For most of us, of course, we are going to be using the monitor in horizontal resolution. So this is one of the pages that I showed you earlier. Now this is now shown at 1:1 size. So the actual printed page is going to look exactly at this size. And this is great for graphic designers because you can see how big that font is that you have chosen at actual size. Now with web pages, when you're designing web pages, of course you can see the fonts because, well, you're viewing the web page already. But for print design, it's great to be able to see your fonts at 1:1 size, the actual size in real life. This, by the way, is 25 centimeters by 32. Speaking of type, fonts, and legibility, well, the thing with 4K resolution on Mac OS is the fonts for web pages, they can be a bit small to read. So usually when I'm viewing web pages on Mac OS, I would actually increase the font size of the web page up to 150% or 125%. On Windows, which I'm going to show you later on, Windows has system-wide scaling for the user interface, web pages, and basically everything else. But for Mac OS, it doesn't have that sort of system-wide scaling. For Mac OS, you can change the resolution, but not the scaling. I'm not sure how to explain this a bit more clearly. Now take, for example, with the web page. So for example, you will probably go to a lot of websites and the text will be small and not comfortable to read. It's a bit inconvenient to be increasing the font size for each web page that you go to. So you can drop down the resolution on Mac OS. You can drop it down here, reduce the resolution to make the text bigger. But this would mean that the text will be more pixelated because now you are not using 4K resolution, you are dropping the resolution down to make the text bigger. Alright, let's take a look at how Windows would handle 4K. I'm going to connect my Microsoft Surface Pro to the display. One of the nice features about this display is when you connect a device to it, it will automatically switch the input source to that particular device. So in this case, it has switched to the Surface Pro. Now if I am connected to this in the first place and I would connect maybe a HDMI to my PlayStation 4, it would switch automatically to the PlayStation 4. So you don't have to go into the menu system to change your input source. This is incredibly convenient. Now speaking of input sources, there is one full-size DisplayPort behind, one full-size HDMI and USB-C. If you connect the iPad Pro using USB-C cable, there will be a pop-up dialog box here asking if you want to switch to USB-C. Alright, so this is 4K on Windows. By default, this is now at 100% scaling. This is similar to Mac OS, so we can see that the text is a bit small, the taskbar, the icons here are a bit small, icons on the desktop, and the text there a bit small. But with Windows, you have the option to scale system-wide. Let me show you. So now it's at 100%. I can switch to 150% and notice the difference. Everything now appears to be bigger. We have bigger taskbars, bigger icons here and here. The text for web pages, for all the web pages that you are going to visit, the text will be bigger. So you don't have to increase the text size for individual web pages. And this is incredibly convenient on Windows 10, but it's lacking on Mac OS. 4K resolution makes everything look sharp. I can still see individual pixels though, but I use this monitor at one arm's length away. At this distance, I cannot see individual pixels, but if you look close, you can still see individual pixels. Alright, now I want to show you what happens if you run old software. So if you're running old Adobe software like CS6 and older on Windows, the user interface is not going to scale up. So you're going to get very tiny menus, very tiny icons, the toolbar, the palettes, all these are going to be very tiny, very uncomfortable to read, and a bit difficult to click as well because everything's so tiny. This is Adobe CS6. Let me show you Adobe CC. So with Adobe CC and the newer software and basically other apps that have been upgraded to take advantage of high-res screens, the user interface, menu, buttons, palettes, they are all going to be sized pretty well. So you're not going to have those tiny things to click. It's going to be more usable, easier to use, easier to click, easier to read. Windows actually handles 4K better than Mac OS, alright? Before that I want to show you what happens when you connect this iPad Pro using the USB-C cable. So when you connect the cable, there will be this dialog box that pops up, so you can choose to switch to USB signal. And this is what you get. So iOS doesn't have the ability to stretch to fill the screen yet, so this is the same aspect ratio that you get on the iPad. Refresh rate seems good, and I'm not sure what resolution this is exactly, but it looks great. So let me take this out, and it would switch back to the HDMI input from my Mac OS. This is Adobe Lightroom, the app that I use to edit my photos. Because this is in 4K resolution, I can see a lot more. I can see more thumbnails, and because the pixel density is kind of high, everything looks pretty sharp and the colors are great as well. So it's really fantastic to be editing photos on this screen. Now, of course, you can change the size of the thumbnails to see more thumbnails. The thing is, with 4K resolution, you are getting about more than twice the amount of pixels compared to a 1440p monitor. So when you have 2 times more the amount of pixels, you can see 2 times more the amount of content, desktop, or whatever you want to see on your screen. The first thing that I noticed when I use this screen for editing photos is the anti-glare coating. You may see some white haze here because of the window on the side. So when I edit photos, I really have to close the curtains to minimize the white glare. But this anti-glare coating, well, it's actually no different compared to my BenQ monitor. It's just that with my BenQ monitor, it has the shading hood, so I don't see that anti-glare or the white haze thing going on. But now, when I'm using a monitor without the shading hood, I can tell instantly the difference the anti-glare coating makes and also the shading hood makes. Speaking of colors earlier, let's take a look at the color support as measured by the Spider 5 Pro that I have. So this monitor supports up to 97% sRGB, 67% NTSC, and 73% Adobe RGB. So you can consider this an sRGB screen. Now Dell has another monitor that supports up to 99% Adobe RGB. That's the U3219Q, which is also a 32-inch 4K monitor, but that monitor is significantly more expensive compared to this. So the main difference between this and that when it comes to work is this is good for general purpose photo and video editing, for blogging, writing, basically for anything that you need a lot of pixels, the size. You can get all these features in a more affordable package here. If you really need the color accuracy, for example, if you need to be comparing printed proofs against the screen, then go for Adobe RGB screens. But for my purposes, I'm using this at home. I am not comparing against printed proofs. I am not comparing this color, the colors here against other monitor colors. So this monitor, the color support here, this is more than good enough for me. Working with Photoshop or other graphic software like Adobe Illustrator, InDesign, other graphic apps is fantastic. Because of the extra resolution, you have more space to put all these palettes here. And this photo that I have just opened up, this is a 16 megapixel photo. And now I am viewing this at 63%. Basically, I have scaled this up to fill the screen. There are 6 pans here. So let me show you what happens when I zoom into 100%. So at 100%, basically I can still see a huge part of that photo. I mean, the resolution, the 4K resolution, the number of pixels on this screen, it's incredible. And because of the sharpness, you can really see the details very clearly and large because, well, the screen is large. This is Adobe CS5 that I'm using. This is an old software, but the scaling, the user interface scaling here with Mac OS, it looks fine. It looks all right. But on Windows, as I showed you earlier, those icons there, they are like tiny. This is Adobe Illustrator. As mentioned earlier, doing page design on this screen, it is wonderful. This is 33 by 55 centimeters, and this is the actual size of the page, as if it's going to be printed on paper. Alright, so this is Final Cut Pro. Now the first thing when I use Final Cut Pro, coming from a 1440p monitor, is there is now so much pixel. I can view this at 1080p. I can see more of my clips here. I can see more of my projects here. On the low-res monitor, sometimes I may actually need to scroll. There are scroll bars here. I may actually need to scroll, but here, right now, I can see everything without the need to scroll. So what this means is I save a lot of time. I can just click without scrolling. And also when I'm choosing effects here, I can see more effects here. I don't have to scroll down to look for the particular effect. I can see a lot of effects and I can just click and choose the particular effect. And also for the timeline, because the monitor is bigger, there is higher resolution as well. You can see more of the timeline, less scrolling required, and you can, well, increase the size of the timeline as well to see more of the thumbnails. This is fantastic, and as mentioned earlier, the colors are great. And because this is a 4K monitor, when you are editing 4K videos, you can now view your videos at 1:1. The screen, your video will basically fill up the whole screen. And the level of clarity, the sharpness, the detail that you can see on a 4K screen, it is at a next level compared to a 1440p monitor. The difference in sharpness is quite noticeable. This is a significant improvement. Another thing that I noticed straight away when I first used this monitor, besides the anti-glare coating, is input lag. Now this monitor runs 4K resolution at 60 Hz, which is the same refresh rate as my main monitor, the BenQ monitor, which is 27 inches at 1440p. Now, on such a large screen, this refresh rate causes some input lag. So as I move this window around, I can see that the animation is not that smooth. Now this input lag is not as obvious when you're using smaller screen, because when you're moving windows around, you're actually not moving a lot of distance, but on such a large screen, it actually is quite noticeable. But this does not affect my work, of course, it's just something that I notice. There are, of course, monitors with higher refresh rates, but those monitors are usually gaming monitors. The colors are usually not as good compared to sRGB or Adobe RGB monitors. So that's the compromise. Someone from the unboxing video asked if I can hear any buzzing or humming sound from the monitor. No, I cannot. This is virtually silent, and this is not very warm even though I have this monitor on for a few hours now. It doesn't give out much heat, which is great. Now let's talk about backlight bleeding and black color uniformity. Now I am actually recording this in daytime. My curtains are not able to block out all the light, so this is the best I can do. I will show you some photos instead. So there is definitely some issues with black color uniformity. So you can see at the four corners of the screen, there is this light magenta cast. By the way, I have enhanced this photo to increase the brightness and contrast so that you can see the color cast. And even when I am filming this with the curtains in daylight, with the curtains closed, you can still see the color cast. And for backlight bleeding, you can see that there are some wavering backlight bleeding at the bottom edge, at the left, and also at the right. There is also some backlight bleeding at the top right side of the monitor, but it's not as obvious. Part of this magenta cast is caused by the IPS glow, so depending on the angle you are looking at the screen, you may see more or less of this color cast. IPS monitors have IPS glow, so that's sort of unavoidable. With my BenQ monitor, the IPS glow, when I look at the corners, it's sort of like light gray, very neutral. It doesn't have any color cast to it. If you're using black for your user interface background, you may notice issues with the color uniformity. So in this case, for example, with Photoshop, I would change the user interface background to gray instead. When you're watching movies with black bars at the top and bottom, you may also notice the color uniformity issues, but it's not that irritating to me because it's quite subtle, it's not that obvious. And the last thing I want to talk about is the HDR capability of this monitor. So this monitor is VESA certified HDR 400, and it's capable of playing and showing HDR content, but it's not as good compared to the previous Dell monitor that I have reviewed. With a good HDR monitor, you should be able to see more details in the shadow area. So for example, with this particular film, this is Logan, by the way. I mean, the movie is Logan. For this lady here, this patch of hair here, I can see some details here, like highlights here, but it's not that obvious. On a good HDR monitor, I can see the individual strands of hair, the details here quite clearly, but here it's a bit more difficult to see, and at a glance this is just a patch of black to me. I mean, this is still HDR quality, but not as good compared to real HDR monitors. Alright, so that's pretty much all I have to say about the Dell U3219Q. If I miss out on anything, you can check out the text review that is on my blog. Let me enlarge this because the scaling on 4K resolutions with macOS, it's not that good. Overall, I have really enjoyed myself using this monitor extensively for the past 2 weeks for work purposes. Yes, there are some issues with the black color uniformity, some backlight bleeding, but when I'm working with the screen, I don't really notice those issues. But if you are using a black background most of the time, then chances are you may notice those issues. Alright, so that's all for my review today. I hope this is informative. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. And if you want to get this monitor, you can get it through the Amazon affiliate links in my video description below. I actually earn some commission and I use the money to get more products to feature on my YouTube channel. So thanks for your help in advance and thank you for watching my video. See you in the next one. Bye.